Hi, and welcome to our PowerPoint presentation on timelines. This PowerPoint will provide an overview of the course that we are going to work through together, but it will also go over issues of time management for the college admissions process. So let's move to our first slide. The topics that we will cover in this course are many. We'll start with the timeline. We'll look at an ideal timeline, and then we'll talk about how you can adjust that timeline to meet your unique wants and needs. We'll talk about things to consider when selecting schools and how to establish a list of criteria that each school must meet in order to make your official list. I'll show you how to research schools and how to track that research. We'll talk about how to arrange visits and admissions interviews, what to pay attention to during those visits, and how to prepare for your admissions interviews. We'll look at different admissions policies and the pros and cons of each. We'll go into standardized testing, the SAT and the ACT, in quite a bit of detail. We'll also look at how to use the Common App website and how to fill out the Common Application. We'll spend quite a bit of time on constructing a winning admissions essay, and we'll talk about scholarships and financial aid. We'll also look at how to navigate important websites and e-tools that can really facilitate the process for you. And last but not least, we'll touch on unique circumstances that some students have. Students who want to study engineering or nursing really have to meet a different set of criteria than students who have different majors. We'll also talk about how to go about the athletic recruiting process and how to select a school if you have a learning difference. One of the major themes that will be consistent throughout this course is what I like to call the dance. I mentioned it in the beginning, but it's really the constant push and pull that takes place between parent and child throughout the admissions process. Ideally, you want your college junior or senior to work as independently as possible, but as a parent, it's really your job to be in the background, guiding them when things get tough. As such, it's essential that you be aware of each stage of the process so that when you're required to step in, you're prepared and ready to do so effectively. This is a process that eventually is going to result in your child leaving your home and living independently. And it can be emotional for parents, but it can also be extremely rewarding and comforting. I've divided the college admissions process up into three major phases. Phase 1 occurs during junior year, Phase 2 the summer between junior and senior year, and Phase 3 during the fall of senior year. Phase 1 is devoted mostly to completing tasks that set the student up for success when it actually comes time to fill out and submit applications. It's very preparatory in nature. Phase 2 and Phase 3 get into the actual logistics of filling out and submitting applications. So let's look at Phase 1 first. During this phase, students prepare for and take their standardized tests. They research schools, they visit schools, and they obtain recommendations from teachers, coaches, and extracurricular moderators. The reason that this phase is so important is because it will minimize the amount of work that a student has to complete during their senior year. Students who do not complete the tasks assigned in Phase 1 during junior year end up with so much work to complete in the fall of senior year that they get very, very stressed. And it's extremely difficult for them to manage the completion of the entire application process, plus their extracurriculars and their classwork for school. So Phase 1, junior year, is essential in setting students up for success later on. Phase 2 occurs during the summer, more specifically in August, before senior year. The Common Application website and all college admissions websites update typically around July 31st, August 1st, which means that during the first week of August, students can begin to fill out their Common Application as well as their school-specific applications. They can also obtain their essay questions and begin writing essays and, admissions essays and short answer questions. Many students don't want to devote a portion of their summer to this. I understand that. However, if they don't do it during August, then they're going to have to do it in the fall, in September and October, while working on extracurricular activities and completing their regular academic work for school. So it really behooves them to get this done during August. It's not uncommon for students to complete all of their applications and essays in August and start the fall, go to school in September, ready to submit those applications. And that's terrific for them because it truly minimizes the stress that they'll experience during the fall of senior year. Phase 3 occurs during the fall of senior year. This phase is used for the actual submission of applications. Sometimes students do not finish all of their apps during August before senior year, so they can do it during the fall. Sometimes they don't finish all of their essays and writing pieces, so they do that during the fall of senior year. They can also go on a final round of visits to make sure that they're happy with the schools on their list, and sometimes do overnight visits for like the schools that are maybe their top 2 or 3 choices. This is a terrific idea and a great way to figure out if the school is really a good fit for them. Also, some students go on admissions interviews during the fall of senior year. Applications are typically submitted in time between mid-August and January. Schools that offer rolling admissions often begin accepting applications in August. The earlier you get your application in, the better, and I'll go into this in greater detail when we talk about applications. Students who decide to submit apps under an early decision or early action policy will have deadlines that range from November 1 to November 15th. And students who go with regular admissions will have to send their applications in between January 1 and January 15th. Now, most high school guidance counselors require a 2-week notification period for submission prior to a deadline, which means that if an application has a deadline of November 1st, the students have to submit the application and all the necessary paperwork to the guidance counselor by the middle of October. This means that ideally, if your kid only has rolling admissions apps and early action apps, they could have all their paperwork turned in by the middle of October. If you're going to go with some regular decision apps, they'll have all their paperwork turned in by, let's say, the 2nd to 3rd week of December prior to Christmas break. And then once all of it is turned in, you can have a great sigh of relief and just wait for the acceptances to roll in. This slide provides a graphic representation of the timeline that occurs for junior year. Ideally, your son or daughter will begin researching schools in the fall of junior year. They'll prep for either the SAT or the ACT sometime junior year. Students have to complete Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry to take both the SAT and the ACT successfully. So if your son or daughter has taken Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry before the start of junior year, then he or she can prep for the test in the fall and take it in the fall and the winter. If they're taking, let's say, Geometry or Algebra 2 during junior year, then they're really going to have to prep in the spring and take the tests in the spring. Spring is really the best time to visit college campuses. Never take a kid to see a campus when it's cold, gray, and rainy, because no matter how fabulous the school is, I guarantee they will hate it. Spring weather usually starts to hit around the end of March. College campuses empty out in the beginning of May. That gives you a short window of time in the spring, end of March through April to the first week of May, to take your son or daughter to visit schools, at least along the East Coast. I'm sure in the Southern Hemisphere it's different. Make sure before you schedule those visits that you look at spring break for your son or daughter, as well as and the schools that you wish to visit are on spring break. And I'll cover all that later in greater detail when we talk about college visits. At the end of junior year, students should ask teachers and coaches and extracurricular moderators for recommendations. Hopefully by the end of junior year, your son or daughter will have a list of prospective schools. That's a pretty solid list, and by that I mean that it contains maybe a few reach schools, a healthy amount of good match schools, and 1 or 2 safety schools. And again, I'll go in greater detail when we talk about researching schools. The summer before senior year is a crucial time for students who really want to stay on top of the application process. As I mentioned before, the Common Application website and all college admissions websites update typically the last week of July or first week of August. So this means that sometime around August 1st, your son or daughter should be able to start to fill out his or her college applications. The first step is to set up a Common Application account, and I'll go into this in greater detail when we get to our application section. The Common Application requires that a student write 1 college admissions essay, a full-length essay. Those 2 things should definitely be completed during August before senior year. They can continue to research schools, and they can also really finalize their list of schools. If your son or daughter decides that he or she wants to send anything additional with their application, now is the time to create it. Some students send a resume of activities, some send a digital portfolio, some send a portfolio of artwork if they're applying to an art program, or maybe they audition for a music program. Some just decide to send additional writing pieces. There are all different kinds of things that you can send to supplement your application, which again I'll get into later. Also, by the end of August, if they have not done it, students should schedule admissions interviews for the fall if needed. It's typically small private liberal arts schools that still do admissions interviews, but the time to schedule is really in August, because each school only has a set number of slots, and if you wait too long, slots will fill up. If your son or daughter wants to do additional college visits or maybe an overnight at their top 2 to 3 schools, try to schedule that in August. You can always make the appointments in August for, let's say, October, November, December, and cancel them later if you don't want them. But if you don't schedule them sometime during August or at the beginning of September, most likely the slots will be gone and then the opportunity will be missed. So senior year, you're finally here. This is the timeline for senior year. Hopefully your son or daughter will move through phase 1 and 2 with alacrity and efficiency. So by the time school starts, they're well positioned. Kids who do not do, as I said before, phase 1 and 2 during junior year and the summertime end up really, really stressed in the fall of senior year. So again, I highly encourage you to make sure that they complete the appropriate tasks at those times so that when senior year comes, they're really ready to roll. The fall of senior year should be spent filling out additional applications. Not all schools accept the Common App. And again, I'll go into this later during our application section, but some schools want students to fill out their own application or a school-specific application. State schools are notorious for this. If your son or daughter hasn't already done this, they can complete that during the fall of senior year. They can also write additional essays and complete additional writing pieces. A lot of schools that use the Common App, while they take the Common App admissions essay, they also require an additional writing piece to be completed. And of course, school-specific applications typically have separate essays. Sometimes kids can use their Common App essay for a school-specific application. Sometimes they have to write a new essay. So the fall of senior year, if it hasn't already been done, is really the time to finish that up. Students can do additional visits or overnights to see different schools. And they can also complete admissions interviews if needed. Hopefully they will be submitting applications to rolling admission schools sometime during August, September, October. They'll be submitting early action, early decision applications in November and regular decision applications in the beginning of January. Given that most high schools require that students hand in the paperwork for applications 2 weeks prior to the deadline, kids who are submitting regular decision apps are handing in their paperwork to their guidance counselor during, let's say, like the second week of December. So probably by the second week of December, your son or daughter will be finished submitting all of their applications to their high school guidance counselor, and you can take a big sigh of relief and then just sit back and try and relax and wait to hear in schools. Depending on your timeline, some students may engage in the process of college admissions more than others. This slide, the checklist / required, really provides a list of things that you can't get around. They're mandatory. They must be done. Your son or daughter will need to take the SAT or the ACT. He or she will need to research schools and visit schools. He or she will need to obtain teacher recommendations, a minimum of 2. He or she will need to fill out the common application and write a minimum of at least 1 admissions essay, and he or she will need to submit their applications to their guidance counselor. So this is the list of variable checklist items. Now I have SAT, ACT at the top because some schools are test optional. While I highly recommend, and I'll get into this later when we talk about standardized testing, that every student take the SAT and ACT at least once to see how they do, if you discover that your son or daughter is not a strong test taker, he or she can focus specifically on schools that are SAT optional. And I'll get into those later, again, like I said, when we talk about standardized testing. That's why I have the SAT and the ACT on the variable list. School-specific applications and additional writing are variable. Sometimes when students do not embrace the college admissions process until the very last minute, they focus only on schools that take the Common App and only on schools that do not require additional writing beyond the basic Common App essay. And that's because they have certain time constraints that they've come up against. Some students choose to avoid schools that offer admissions interviews because they don't want to take the time to do them. Some opt not to do overnight visits, and some choose not to submit a resume of activities, a digital resume, or any supplementary materials, which is fine. So these items are variable. You don't have to do them. They are not required. They can, however, really enhance your application packet, so I do recommend that you consider them. Adjusting the timeline. I mentioned that it was possible to adjust the timeline. It is, but of course you have to plan ahead. While some tasks have to be completed in a certain sequence and deadlines are really important, you do have a certain degree of flexibility as to when and how things get done. I provided a document that's in Module 1 entitled Sample Timeline and Stories. This describes 3 students, all fake names, who I worked with in the past, and talks about their unique schedules. Each student had really unusual circumstances that required tremendous adjustment in how and when things were completed during the process. So hopefully this will give you an idea as to how you can move things around to meet your own personal scheduling needs, not only for your son or daughter, but for your family. So take a look at this and then move on to the timeline worksheet. Now that you've read about how you can adjust the timeline during college admissions, it's time for you to try to create your own timeline. I've provided 3 tools for this. Under the timeline worksheet in Module 1, you'll see 3 sections: a graphic organizer, a link to a blank calendar, and a checklist by topic. You can use the graphic organizer to decide when you will try to fit each phase of the college admissions process into the life of your son or daughter. To do this, check out the topic headings, they're in bold, on the checklist. This provides you a broader sense of organization. Then you can move on to the blank calendar. The blank calendar is really for you to try to fit each specific task into your busy life, the busy life of your son and daughter. To do this, take a look at the and focus on the tasks listed under each topic heading. Feel free to post your thoughts and questions on our class discussion. It's labeled timeline discussion. I'm really interested to see what you come up with to meet your needs, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And remember, before you start trying to fit your own life into the graphic organizer and the blank calendar, make sure that you consider your life in a larger sense. Prior to beginning this process, it's best to get out your son or daughter's school calendar and to look at your own calendar. Consider when you have events coming up, such as family weddings or vacations. Take a look at your son or daughter's school vacations, when SAT and ACT tests are offered, when they have significant events like proms or sporting events, tournaments, plays, etc., band concerts. Anything that might interfere with their being free and available to take tests, meet with a tutor, fill out applications, research schools, visit schools, etc. As stated earlier, I highly recommend that you leave the entire month of August prior to senior year open for your son or daughter. I also highly recommend that you set time aside during the spring of their junior year to take them to visit schools. And I recommend that you leave some time open in the fall of senior year to take them on a second round of visits. So let's get started. I'm eager to see what you come up with.